If you're not putting that mask on first, you're not going to do well. Mari Ryan. Unfortunately, our live is not working, so you're going to have to use this.
I'll use the mic.
Thank you.
Or I will not use the mic. We have some slides there to work from. All right, let's just make sure we're all here. And I am not a podium speaker, so I will work on getting that out. I'm going to keep our photographer on his toes because I like to move around and be able to be close to you. So I'm going to make a statement here. You can't achieve your business objectives without your employees. You see some heads shaking. Now, I don't mean to insult you. You're all business people. But you can't achieve your business results without your employees. So we know this to be true. Do we agree? Everybody with me on this one? Okay, we know this to be true. Anybody who's ever hired somebody knows you can't get to those business objectives and you can't have a sustainable business without your people. So the question becomes, how do we create thriving workplaces where both the people and the business thrive? Because both the people and the business have to thrive in order for you to be able to achieve your objectives. That makes sense? All right. So the question becomes, and what we're going to spend our time talking about this afternoon is, how do we create the conditions in the workplace where people thrive? That's what we're going to do. But what does it mean to thrive? So when you think about yourself, when you feel like you're thriving, do you know what that feels like? You know when you're like running on all cylinders, right? When you feel good, when you feel energized, when you feel like you have a word we've heard a lot today, purpose. When you feel connected to what you're doing. You have an optimistic outlook and you're looking towards the future because the future looks good. I'm just going to keep track of my time here, so hang on one sec. So optimism is a big piece of what it means to be thriving. These are folks that are going to be there with energy, they're going to show up, and they're going to be the ones you're going to want to have on your team. But not everyone is thriving. Many people today are struggling. We've seen this a lot in the last couple of years. People are worried about money, right? We saw the huge spike in unemployment at the beginning of the pandemic. A lot of people were out of work. People were food insecure, housing insecure. There were a lot of issues. So a lot of people are struggling. These are the folks who are going to be more likely to take sick days, to have beginning symptoms of chronic illnesses. So these are the folks we need to be looking out for. But who we really need to be looking out for are these folks. These are the ones who are suffering. So who is suffering? The people who don't earn a living wage because their employer doesn't pay them a living wage. Or they might have housing or food insecurity. They might be the person who's actually sleeping in the car in the parking lot. I had a CEO that I interviewed for my book who told me that story. That was her first priority, was to help that person in a way that was going to be meaningful for their life. So these folks are going to be more likely to take sick time, to have chronic illnesses, to smoke, and to have health behaviors that are not going to support their well-being. So when we think about what it means to thrive, I found this interesting information earlier this year from Microsoft. Now, all right, none of us work in companies as big as Microsoft, right? We get that. Them and they used to be 60,000 employees when I was on a project there. There are a lot more than that, no doubt. But they've started to think about thriving, not employee engagement anymore. It's about thriving. And here's what they're saying is to be energized and empowered to do meaningful work. I just want to read you this quote from this article that was in the Harvard Business Review in June. And if anybody wants a link to this, just let me know. At Microsoft, they're defining thriving as to be engaged, empowered, and to do meaningful work. This is the new core aspiration we have for our employees, one that challenges us to push ourselves every day so every employee can feel they're pursuing that sense of purpose. Our focus on thriving isn't just about recovering from the impact of the pandemic or moving pre-COVID employee sentiment, matching pre-COVID employee sentiment scores. It's about coming out the other side and doing even better. So that's what we're really thinking about now, is what does it mean for people to thrive in the workplace? So I'm going to propose this model that is a path to sustainable business results. Every one of you as a business person knows you are here in business to obtain sustainable business results. That's why we're here. So here I'm proposing that we use well-being as the foundation. Think of this as a different form of the Maslow pyramid. Most of you are familiar with the Maslow pyramid, right? What's at the bottom of the pyramid? Food, shelter, basic things like that. So let's start with basics as being well-being. And then we layer on top of that culture. You've heard about culture today. This isn't the first time it's come up. Other people have talked about culture today. Because culture is the norms, the values, the behaviors that work in service of how you're going to create your organization. And on top of that, we're going to layer employee experience. Because the employee experience is about everything that happens to a person from the very moment they come into your hiring process until after they leave. Check out my post this week on LinkedIn about what happens when people leave. That's all about employee experience. When we create good culture and a good employee experience, the outcome is employee engagement. And from employee engagement, we get sustainable business results. That's how you get to sustainable business results. So I'm going to talk, why should we care about well-being? There's a ton of statistics. I could spend the rest of the afternoon talking about statistics about why well-being matters, because it's about the money. It's always about the money, right? But there's a lot of it on the table. There's medical costs, there's turnover costs. We heard about turnover costs earlier, and there's lost productivity. All of that is real. Those are real dollars that affect every business. I want to just take a moment and introduce this model of what are the drivers of well-being in the workplace. Because when we think about well-being in the workplace, you might think, oh, it's about having that pool table or that, the hair salon down the hall. It's not necessarily about those things. Those could be great and those could be helpful. But there are a number of drivers in the workplace that actually support, or more importantly, when they're not there, they diminish the well-being of the employee. So there's 4 of them here that I refer to: culture, job design, management systems, and environment. So when we think about culture, it's the values, it's the norms, it's the things that happen in your workplace that create that environment. Anybody ever worked in a toxic workplace? Just raise your hand if you have. Oh, a few of you have. How surprising that a few of you have actually worked in toxic workplaces. Imagine that. Actually, in my book, which is called The Thriving Hive, I have a name for that. It's called the Dive Hive, as opposed to the Alive Hive, which is where we all would work. And in culture, we have to think about how we contribute to that in a lot of ways. The second piece is job design. Job design is something we're hearing a lot more about. Deloitte's been doing a lot of publishing on job design this year. Think of things like, I saw an article this week about nurses and scheduling, right? When you think about scheduling, you can't manage your life if you don't know what your work schedule is. You can't manage your life if you don't have a living wage. If you have no autonomy in your job, in the things that you do, or be able to make decisions, right? If you work in a call center and all you can do is just meet your number, and you've got to do 22 calls today, you've got to take 22 calls. If you don't take 22 calls, we're going to be on your back. There's no autonomy in a role like that. So how do we build that into a job? Management systems is all of those things that include the benefits and the policies and all of the things in the workplace that support that employee experience. Communications, rituals, recognition, job development, career development. All of those are the management systems. And then finally, the environment. Well, this has all been thrown out of whack in the last couple of years, right? The environment, okay, well, I'm sitting at my dining room table with my laptop in front of me and I'm looking down at my Zoom screen. That's part of the environment now. That's part of what the workplace is. So it's not just having that fancy cafeteria or all the light that's coming in from looking out onto the green park that's next to the office building. Well, that's nice, but that's not all what environment is about these days. So we have to think about all of these things. So there are many, many drivers in the workplace for well-being. There are also some challenges that we're having with the way employees feel about this. So this is some research from Gallup. I think Martha mentioned Gallup earlier today. They do fabulous research. And this is around employees' perceptions about their caring for their well-being. And it goes back a long way. I think the original year on this is 2010. Wow, it goes way back in time, right? And look at that line, it barely budged. And then all of a sudden, it went up. And we really started to show that we were caring for our employees, or at least that was their perception. And then the pandemic hit, and everything got blown out of whack, right? So it started to go down, but now it was just moving along a little bit. So it went from a high right after the start of the pandemic, and has made a decline. And it's not getting any better. People do not feel like they're being cared for. So this is a challenge, because today, this is what employees want. They care more about prioritizing their health and well-being than they ever have before. All right, Sunny said it, right? It's important to everyone. And this is why employers have to pay attention to this. So if we look at this, how do we think about creating a place where both the people and the business thrive? So let's go through this a little bit in terms of how and when we care for our people, we will know that our people will take care of the business, right? You just got to take care of your people. They'll take care of the customers. They'll take care of the customers. They will. So here's what thriving businesses have. Thriving businesses are businesses that are going to be succeeding for a lot of reasons, right? They're going to have better customer service and retention. You know a business, right? I can't wait to go to the restaurant owner who was here today, right? Don't you just want to, like, I just want to see where the locations were, like how far is it from my house in Plymouth, right? I'm going to go there. And it will be, because you know what? If you have long service employees in a restaurant business, that's going to be something that's really going on well there. So there's going to be that loyalty of customers and employees. We're also going to see higher sales and increased profits. But we also want to link employee well-being to business results. Now, the information I'm going to share here is generally based on large organizations, because we have to have measurements by which to be able to measure this. So companies that build a culture of health by focusing on the well-being and safety of their workforce yield greater value for their investors. Now, investors are just one group of stakeholders, right? With lots of stakeholders in business. Employees are one, right? So investors are one. But there's 3 separate studies from portfolio companies that were identified to be able to show those that could have a measurable culture of health in their workplaces and how they fared in comparison to a standard. The Standard & Poor's 500 was used as the benchmark. And you can see significant in return on the performance of these organizations. And I love just bringing in this little bit of data to say it works. This really does work. And that there is really good research that shows us that it works. So, question you're saying is, okay, that's all good, I get it, I know I need my people, but how do we create the conditions where people will thrive? So let me just take you through a model here. So this is a model that I use in the story. My book is actually a parable, and so it's written as a story. Do you want to show your book? Oh, I think I'm gonna. It's in the materials. It's called The Thriving Hive, but it's written as a parable. So it's a story about how we can take these elements and bring them into the workplace so that people can thrive. And these create the conditions where people thrive. And the first one is purpose. So we've heard a little bit about purpose today. Purpose answers one question. Why are we here? Why are we here? And whether that's for the business as a whole, do you have a mission, right? Like for the good, right? Be the good. That's what Eastern Bank is. It's here for the good. And how do we do that in a way that people can relate to that? I really love this quote. So purpose answers the question, why do we exist? And some of you may know this author, speaker, and consultant, Patrick Lencioni. You've probably all seen at least one of his business books. It's pretty well known. He says, employees in every organization at every level need to know that at the heart of what they do lies something grand and aspirational. I've got to really feel like I feel like I'm connected to this. And you see this in mission-driven organizations, right? Hospitals and healthcare and home care workers who really feel connected to the people that they work with. Values is the second piece. So values, actually somebody brought up values earlier today as well, is we've got to have the values that drive the behavior and those then really drive the culture of an organization. So they work in service of purpose. And you know what the values are, right? You know, there's someplace they're written on the wall in the hall, right? Everybody sees those in an organization. But what really matters is not what's written on the wall, but the behavior that you see in the hall. What is that? And does that support the values? And does it support the purpose? And culture, I mentioned already. That's the behaviors, that's the norms, that's the things that drive the, again, work in service of both the purpose and the values. All right, we tripped over a chord there. So let's just go back and look real quick here at the drivers of performance, right? It starts with leaders. You as leaders in your organization are going to be the ones that drive those values, which is going to drive the behaviors, which is going to drive the culture. We're just going to swap out there. And it's going to drive the performance, right? So leadership is where this all starts. So it starts with you as the leaders in your organization and how you as a leader show up and how you care for your people. So the last three elements I just want to mention real quick here. Communicate. So the last three are communicate, celebrate, and collaborate. So communication is an essential element for every aspect of business. Think about this early in the pandemic, right? We saw this a lot with people in the pandemic. You know, we had no clue what was going on. We didn't know from one day to the next, you know, oh, we're going to be out for 2 weeks, right? That's what Andy said this morning. And we all laughed because we didn't know. And he mentioned as one of his core in the curriculum that he suggested this morning that communication was a key piece to this. People need to know what's going on. Even if you tell them, I don't know what's going on, I'm going to tell you everything I do know about what's going on, and here's how we're going to move forward. But you just got to be honest, and you've got to communicate. So communication is a really key element of this, because with the lack of communication, what happens? People make up their own stories. Yeah, and guess what happens with those stories? They get told again and again and again. And half the time, those stories probably have no relevance to truth. So communication is a key element to this. Collaboration is really important in any organization because unless you work alone, you have to collaborate. There's going to be people on your team that you have to work with. So we have to figure out how to work together, what's the best way to work together, and we have to feel like we are a team. And when we work as a team, that's when we get things done. And that's when we feel like we're part of something bigger, because it's not just about me, it's about everybody on my team. So teamwork and collaboration are another key element of this. And we heard about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging earlier today. Belonging's been added to that, an important element, because we all need to feel like we belong. And that's where collaboration comes into play. But this is my favorite part. Celebrate. We're here to celebrate today. So many of you that do work in this great community and the way that you are making contributions. But we have to do that with our people too. So the blog that I posted on LinkedIn earlier this week starts with the statement, "Not even a cupcake," Mary lamented as she left her job of 8 years. Not even a cupcake, right? What are the rituals that we have in our workplace that celebrate people, that make them feel that they're cared for and that they feel valued? That's when people feel like they're part of something bigger and that they feel cared for and that they thrive. So a thriving workplace, it starts with thriving employees. So what can we do to be able to help create the conditions in the workplace where the employees will thrive? And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Martha. I'm Mari Ryan, CEO and founder of Advancing Wellness.